A 2017 report from the Auditor General and its subsequent follow-up report from 2021 found, amongst other things, that the department does not yet effectively support the transparency of Australian government funding allocation and does not analyse school funding allocation data to ensure that funding is distributed in accordance with need. And it also found that the department does not always ensure that non-government representative bodies which allocate public funding to the private school sector fulfil their transparency requirements. In previous estimate sessions, the department has said that approved authorities for non-government schools are required to provide an annual acquittal certificate from an independent qualified accountant, and that approved authorities must provide assurance that the financial assistance paid to the approved authority during the year was spent appropriately. They've then gone on to say that the department then verifies the accountant credentials on a sample of these submissions and, if required, conducts further analysis and investigation. I'm interested to know if this is still the department policy, that is, that in effect the only oversight you have over public money going out to private schools is checking whether they used a reputable accounting firm to validate it.
So we've introduced a report that comes into place that gives you full public transparency of that funding.
Does it indicate how the money is spent or just the money that's been given to the authority? Because my understanding is that we don't get oversight as to whether that's actually going to the schools that have the highest need, which is a bit of a problem in the way that they're allowed to distribute funds.
The system can redistribute the funds as they see fit. Sometimes they actually have a better understanding of where the need is and they're more targeted of where that money goes.
If I've got this right, there is no requirement whatsoever on the independent and Catholic sector to distribute their funding according to need.
No, there absolutely is. They're each required to distribute the funding according to a needs-based model.
And do we have evidence that they're doing that? Because
Yes.
what I'm hearing is that they can distribute it as they see fit.
No, we do, and I'll talk to you about how that happens. So we draw the cheque, if you like, based on our base SRS funding and each of the loadings in relation to census data, how many children are there, what are their characteristics. We do that and we distribute that to the approved authorities. Under the legislation, they must have a needs-based arrangement for distributing that money, but they are able to calculate what that needs-based arrangement is.
So there's an SRS funding model. It determines how much each student needs as a base rate. There's only 6 loadings based on need and location. That's what the government uses to determine how much money goes to those two sectors. Yes.
Yep.
But then those sectors are allowed to distribute that money on their own model of need, which is not necessarily the same model that the government uses. Is that correct?
And that is not just the case for the non-government sector, that is the case for all sectors. So the states, the territories and the non-government sector look at how that need looks in their particular, because it's obviously the SRS and the loadings are still a reasonably blunt instrument because they're happening at that national level.
Okay, so what I'm hearing though is we have a model, but we don't necessarily, the funding isn't being applied in that way in all jurisdictions.
I think Dr Baxter talked about the way in which the Commonwealth draws the cheque, so to speak. So that's the SRS, and then the fact is that we do it at the national level. In the public sector, it would go from Treasury to Treasury. And then, for example, there'd be a resource allocation model in a public school system. We don't actually have a clear line of sight to the way we draw the cheque to the way it's distributed. So in that fact, Senator, you're right.
Okay. Senator, can I also just add on the actual compliance of the money, making sure that the money is acquitted and spent the way it is supposed to. We do have a number of steps. I know you referred to one of those steps. I'm happy to put that on notice for you.
That'd be great.
Yeah, well,
I'm interested to know what's changed since the Auditor General's report and their findings about where the deficiencies are, and to get a clear understanding of what the department has put in place to address those deficiencies.